Hey guys, welcome back to another video from Wacky Engineering, and today we are going to be going over drivers to set up communications with the Micrologix 1100. So if you watched our last video, we went over how to install all the necessary software to connect to a Micrologix 1000 or Micrologix 1100. If you haven't watched that video and you need to know how to get that software and how to set up the device driver for the Micrologix 1000, definitely go back and check that video out. If you went ahead and purchased an 1100 and you need to know how to set up its communication drivers, then keep watching and we're going to get into that. Today we're going to be talking about two different ways that you can connect to that Micrologix 1100, and both of those ways are going to be using Ethernet. The first method we're going to be using is going to be hooking a Ethernet cable into our Micrologix 1100, and we're going to run it to our router, and then we're wirelessly going to connect from our PC we're using to that router and then to the Micrologix 1100. The second method is going to be running an Ethernet cable straight to your computer, or if your computer is old enough to where it does not do the auto switchover, then you'll run it into a switch from the Micrologix 1100 into a switch, and then from the switch to your PC. So today in front of us we have the Micrologix 1100 from an old Christmas light display that I put together. And right now we have the black Ethernet cable, and it is running into the back of my router. If you guys need some of these communication devices, such as a straight across Ethernet cable, a crossover cable, or an Ethernet switch, look in the description. There will be links to those things. Those links will take you straight to Amazon where you can purchase those at no extra cost to you. So the first thing we're going to want to do on the PLC once it's fired up and the Ethernet cable is plugged in is we want to hit the escape button, and then we want to scroll down to advanced settings, and then we want to scroll down to Ethernet configuration, and we want to see if it has an IP address. So if you have two sets of characters and numbers on your screen, that bottom set of numbers should be the IP address, and if there's nothing there on the bottom set, then you don't have an IP address yet, and we'll have to set that. The top set of characters is the MAC address, and we are going to use software that you downloaded from the last video called Boot P Server, and we're going to use that MAC address to send the PLC its IP address. So if you already have an IP address, you can skip to the next step. But if you don't have an IP address on your PLC, then we're going to give it one. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to verify what your IP address is for the network that PLC is going to be trying to connect to. So because we have our PLC hooked into the back of our router, in this case we're going to be using the wireless on this computer. And we're going to click on the properties of that so that we can see what the IP address is for the computer. So we're going to be looking at the IPv4 address, which is 192.168.1.77, and that is the IP address of this computer. So when we give the PLC an IP address, we're going to be giving it one in the same subnet, and we're only going to change the last either number or numbers. And that last number you can do anywhere from between 1 and 254, and no two IP addresses can be exactly the same on the network, so we definitely cannot use 77. So now that we know that, we're going to open up the Boot P DHCP tool. So we need to click on whichever network adapter that we're going to be using, which in this case is the Wi-Fi adapter that I have plugged in, and we can put a link in the description if you want to get one of these USB Wi-Fi adapters. If you're using a desktop and it might not have Wi-Fi, these are pretty handy. So we're going to click on that adapter, we're going to hit OK, we're going to click on Tools, we're going to look at the network settings. So up top it says the server IP address, and that is the IP address of our PC. That's the subnet mask, and the gateway, which we did see a second ago, they're calling it a DNS server. But that is like the IP address of your router. So that's what that's asking for. So we have all that in there. Probably don't even need to put this in there, but I think this auto-populated. So anyway, that's where you could change that if you needed to. But in this case, this all looks correct. So I'm going to hit OK. So on the screen, you can see that the MAC address of my PLC has populated in this bootp tool. And if you look at the PLC screen, you can see that MAC address shown there. So once we give this an IP address, you'll also be able to see that IP address show up on the PLC screen as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to click this MAC address, double click it, and this client IP address is where we're going to give it one. So remember, we have to choose the first three sets of numbers have to be the same. Subnet is what your computer is, or the network you're trying to connect to. So the last one, we can pick something random like .22. So our IP address is 192.168.1.22. And you can put a host name or description, but I'm just going to leave it blank for now. So we're going to hit OK. So down here, it's giving it a shot, and look, now it says sent. Before it said unable to send, but now it says sent. So it should be on the PLC now. And as you can see, it is on the PLC. So the PLC does have an IP address now. If we want to test just general connectivity to it, we can open up the command prompt by typing CMD and opening that. And a very simple command we can type in is ping, P-I-N-G, space, and then type in that IP address of the PLC, and then hit enter. And if you see 4 replies like that, then at least on a basic level, you know that you're communicating with that PLC. So the next thing we're going to want to do to be able to connect to this PLC and be able to program it or upload from it or download to it is we're going to want to open up RSLinx Classic, and we're going to need to configure a driver for it. So since we are using our PC to connect to the router wirelessly, the driver we're going to want to choose is going to be Ethernet drivers. And as you can see here, this is the driver we set up last time to connect to the 1000 using RS-232. So Ethernet drivers, and we're going to hit add new. We can just leave the name as that. And right here, all we're going to do is type in the IP address of the PLC. So in our case, that is 192.168.1.22. And we're going to hit OK. So we'll go back in here and make sure. So yeah, it showed up. So we're going to hit OK. And we're going to close. And then we're going to hit communications and RS-who. And we're going to open up this driver. And with any luck, it should show up, and there it is. This shows that our PLC is connected. And if I were to unplug this cable right now, you should see a red X go over it. Yep. And then when I plug it back in, the red X should disappear, and it should be connected again. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but it should reconnect here. And there it went. So we have now connected with it using RSLinx. So the next step now is to connect to it with RSLogix Micro. So we can just leave that minimized. I went ahead and pinned this software to my taskbar there, so we will go full screen, and we are going to talk a little bit about uploading and downloading. So what does uploading mean? In the case where we're talking about this PLC, if we wanted to upload a program, we would be taking whatever program is on the PLC and bringing it to the computer. And if we wanted to download, we would be doing the opposite. We would take a program that's on the computer and download it to the PLC. So if it's the first time you're connecting to a PLC, it's very important that you hit upload first. That way you can upload any program that is on there. If you download, you could overwrite something that's on there, and if you don't have that backed up somewhere, that could be really bad because that program could be gone forever. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about upload and download, let's go ahead and do an upload on this. So first thing we'll want to do is hit comms and hit who active go online. And if this was closed, we would just open it. And depending on your network and how many things are hooked to it, as far as PLCs go, you could have many different ones here, but the one in question that we're looking at is the one with the correct IP address. So that's how we know it's the right one. And in this case, there's only one, but we want to click on that and hit OK. So it's trying to automatically search for an offline image. So what that would mean is you've saved that project before and it is in a file on the computer. So if you've never uploaded before, you're not going to find an offline image. So in this case, what we'd want to do is hit create new file. And if it says uploading processor image, that's a good thing because we are now taking what's on the processor and bringing it to the computer, and then we can save that as a project on the computer, and then we've successfully backed up what is on the PLC. Now, something to keep in mind about this PLC and the Micrologix 1000, and a lot of the older PLCs are this way. If you upload the project that's on them and you don't have the original project on the computer, a lot of the, or pretty much all the documentation won't be there. So we see a bunch of different instructions here, and if you know what all these instructions mean, you can kind of follow along. But without any documentation, we don't know exactly what's going on here. And you potentially might not know what that means as far as the documentation, and we are going to go through all that. This video is covering a few things that might be a little advanced for you, and if you don't fully understand that, that's okay. It's just very important that if you're connecting to a PLC, you need to do an upload first, and that's why we're going over this. But just something to keep in mind, if you don't have the original program that the person programmed it from originally, then you're not going to see any documentation. Okay, so now that we've uploaded the program and we are online with it, we're in remote program mode, which is basically you can go online with it and you can make some slight changes to the program while you're online. So one of those changes that we're going to make, and if you don't do this, if you power down this PLC and it powers back up, it will no longer have that IP address that you gave it. And the reason that is because that PLC, out of the box, it wants you to give it an IP address using that boot P server, or potentially a DHCP server. So now that it has an IP address and we're connected to it, we need to save that we want it to use the static IP address that it has here. That way it will have that IP address every time, even if it turns off and back on. So that's why this is grayed out right now. And we could change this IP address again from here once we were online with it. But in this case, all we really need to do is we need to disable the boot P. And we don't need that either. So now it has a static IP address, and if we hit apply and hit, it's basically saying if you do the wrong thing here, you could potentially go offline with it, and then in that case you may have to redo it, but everything looks good here. So we're going to hit apply, and we are still online with it because all we really did is we're just saying, I want you to have a static IP address. Next time I boot you up, I want you to keep this IP address. If this was enabled, then when we powered down and powered back up, it would wipe that IP address out and it would be looking for that boot P server to be giving it one. So we'll go ahead and test that now. So I'm going to hit OK. and I'm going to go offline first. And it wants me to save the changes, and we're going to because we did make some changes with the channel configuration. So we'll hit OK. It wants to do a re-upload, and that's fairly normal. So while that's doing that, right here is a fuse holder, and this fuse supplies power to the processor. So when I'm ready to power cycle this, I'm just going to lift up on this fuse and let this PLC go dead, and then I will push the fuse back in, and then we'll boot it back up, and we'll make sure that it still has the IP address. Okay, so we saved, went offline, it's offline now. So I can go ahead and pop that fuse out, and our PLC died. So we'll give it a couple seconds, and then we'll power it back up. Once again, remember your electrical safety. You don't want to shock yourself. There is, in this specific trainer, 120 volts. So definitely don't work on it while it's hot. I feel pretty comfortable doing what I'm doing here. But if you don't fully know what you're doing, it would be best to just unplug something like this from the wall rather than sticking your hands that close to 120 volts. So we'll jump back in, and we're going to make sure that it still has the right IP address. And there we go, it has retained the IP address. Okay, so now we're going to go over the next device driver that we want to set up that's an alternate way to connect to the PLC. You might use this if you're having problems using the other device driver connecting. In this example, we're going to plug straight into the PLC from the PC with an Ethernet cable, and you'll see that both methods are going to work. Both device drivers are going to work, but this is just an alternate driver that you can set up in case you're having issues with the other driver. So we can go ahead and close out of this, and I'm going to get up and I'm going to unplug the black Ethernet cord, and I'm going to plug in a blue one, and that blue cord just goes straight to the back side of my computer, and it's going to go straight into the PLC. Okay, so since our PLC already has an IP address, all we want to do now is verify that the Ethernet port on the back of our computer is configured for the same subnet as our PLC. So we're going to click on this internet connection icon here, and we're going to go up to this symbol that kind of shows the hardwired connection. We're going to click on that, and then we're going to click on change adapter options. So what we're looking for here is the local area connection. Most computers are probably going to have a gigabit one. That might be a sign that you have the right one. It says gigabit controller. These ones are VM network adapters, so those aren't going to be the right ones. And then this is our Wi-Fi, where we're actually connected to the network wirelessly, so that's not going to be the one either. So we know it's got to be this one. So we're going to left click on it, then right click and click properties, and then we want to scroll down to this Internet Protocol version 4 and go to properties. So yours might be right there to begin with, and you'll want to use a static IP address. So we'll click down here, and in this case we can put any IP address in here that's in the same subnet as that PLC, as long as it's not the exact same as the PLC. So we're going to go 192.168.1.23, and the subnet mask, it puts it in automatically, but you would want to make sure it says 255.255.255.0. And in this case, we don't need to put a default gateway, so we're going to hit OK. Close out of this, close out of this, close out of this. So we're going to jump back on over to RSLinx Classic, and we're going to click on the Communications tab, and we're going to hit Configure Drivers again. This time, we're going to click on the Ethernet IP driver, and we're going to hit Add New. And it's asking for a name again. I'm going to leave it the same because it is slightly different than the other one. The other one is AB Ethernet 1. This one's AB Ethernet IP 1. So we'll leave that there. So now we need to click on the Ethernet port that we just configured, and that is the IP address we just put in. So we're going to click on that one, and we're going to hit OK. And then we can hit close. And now we should be able to click here, and it shows we're connected. Okay, so in this video we learned how to give your Micrologix 1100 an IP address using the boot P server, and we've also learned how to set up the necessary driver to connect to the Micrologix 1100, and then we also learned how to upload from the Micrologix 1100. Stay tuned for the next video where we're going to go over some of the basic instructions such as examine if closed, examine if open, and output energize. Thanks for watching.